The sea seemed timid under the towering gaze of speeding winds. Tidal waves pushed hard to cut their inertia and pace with the wind. Ashin and Ashita, the descendants of the deceased's only son Pradeep, played their usual pranks with the waves, which itself was teasing the children in the striving act to touch their feet. Pradeep glanced at his mom in between the chantings. Chitra smiled at him, sitting at a 10 feet distance behind the milieu and watching the predefined rituals for the day. Pradeep was tightly attached to his mother and followed her path to pursue a career. Being a professor in the same college in which his mother retired as a dean was something he never missed to boast about. Chitra was never among those pampering parents who would want to keep their children under their wings forever. Things were so pragmatic when it was about her son, a stark contrast to the relationship she had with her husband. Everyone knew about Chitra and her husband. Some people never found harmony with each other, but they stayed together to keep the society happy, even at the cost of being a laughingstock in front of the same. Her half-heartedness to the ritual ceremony could be the last evident depiction of their journey so far. Together, but detached. Watching her, and the family from a safer physical distance, he could only find sympathy for her. But deep inside his gut, he felt inept to deride anyone under the sun, other than himself. The brimming guilt churned every bit of good thinking inside him. He tried hard, but couldn't find remorse for letting it pass. Pradeep, on getting his cue for the holy disposal from the priest, took the green banana leaf with the urn containing cremains, surrounded by flowers, rice morsels and numerous other things and moved towards the sea. He stood up from where he was sitting and poised himself in prayers for the departed soul. Chitra mimicked the same while sitting. Ashin and Ashita joined their mother and other relatives while Pradeep sent off the votives into the sinusoidal ripples. May the soul rest in peace. But what about the living souls? He smirked in derision. Isaac swerved his pacing legs, cutting an angular move to his bicycle while negotiating the 90-degree curve. All others, trailing behind, held their breath, anticipating a skidding fall to their reigning race champion. But he was the champion for a reason. How do you do that? Raghu was always the most fascinated. Isaac could only reply with a humble smile. Can you teach me? Idiot. You should have a straighter handle and a silent chain to make a standing pedal. And make sure you drape the seat with one more from your dad's undies. Else that rusty pipe will fill your holes, laughing. Murali was always fond of being derisive to others, and so was his bosom mate Santhosh. Raghu straightened his dilapidated seat cushion, which was nothing but a dollop of garbage cloth. Isaac eyed Raghu to let it go and started pushing his cycle in slow, heavy steps, waving adieu to his friends. Raghu joined him, ignoring the murmuring jokes from the brats behind him. You know them. Don't take it seriously. I have some savings. Need to buy a new cushion. I can't roam around with this dinge. It looks fine. In fact, a lot of innovation has gone into it. I like it. You mean it. Or is this an intellectual Murali to whom I'm talking to? Both of them laughed in unison. Isaac devoured the long, ruddy spread in the sky. The sun was thinking of calling it a day. The golden shores bore the tantrums of the foul-mouthed fishermen, some of them making use of their leisure time to repair the fishing nets. Raghu saw his father amongst the wily gang playing cards under the shade of a sailboat kept upside down. Isaac could see a smirk of disdain on his face. How's Alma? Raghu welcomed the change of subject. She's fine. In fact, she wanted to know when are you visiting our home, again? I can. Anytime. I don't have ties like you, or any other child with a family, chuckles sarcastically, just a prerequisite of reaching back at the doorstep of the infamous St. Anthony's Boys' Town before it clocks 7. What happens if you are late? May not get dinner. Sometimes a 1-hour sighting from the Gospel of Thomas. Depends. Are you coming today? No. I have to wash my clothes. Oh. You have to do that yourself? Isaac could only give a jouncing smile. He felt it amusing to cognize that his friend was living a life way more childish than his. Or was he himself being more mature than the benchmark? Isaac's muse was interrupted with another childish score from Raghu. I heard that your mom was a Jew and your dad was a Christian. And you had to be in the orphanage after their demise in an accident. Ah. You heard it right. So what do you follow? What do you mean? Which one? Do you follow your mom's beliefs or your dad's? Frankly, I don't follow both. And I have a few more years of independence under the law before taking a stand. But as you are in the orphanage, you will preach the Christian verses, right? You recite poems in the class. You sing school anthems loud. Does that mean a lot to you? Spiritually? Nope. Hence, it is proved. Both of them laughed. Isaac found a blooming bud of freshness in their bonhomie. This was not the first time when he felt a special affinity to this friend of his. Was it the intact nincompoopery in his questions? Or was it the similitude in their weaknesses, one being an orphan from an interfaith marriage, while the other, an outnumbered son in a fisherman's degrading hut? Or was it something else? He contemplated the weird thoughts that came flowing to his mind, while watching his buddy trying to catch a free-flying butterfly. Say hi to your mom. I will see her during the weekend. Bye. Bye, Isaac. Actually, you are a nice guy. I really like your presence. I don't like it at home, or with friends. Even at school, the teachers and students mock my dress and cleanliness. Only you're decent to me. And it means a lot. Bye. Raghu hugged him. Isaac was moved by that expression. He felt there was a similar feeling from Raghu. They both were special to each other. Yes, they were special. Savithri, did anyone call? Styling his wet hair with his fingers, Pradeep asked his wife to reset his work-life balance. No. He then directed himself to his mother, who was eagerly waiting to reset herself from the whole milieu. Are you okay? Ma? Dusting off a few grains of sand from his wet hair, she smiled. Savithri joined them and so did Ashin and Ashita. He watched them carefully. Everything seemed perfect. They completed the cycle. The cycle of love, the cycle of togetherness. A person, perhaps the most important person, had left the group forever. But there was no sign of a miss. The urn floated in front of them in the somber waves, but they hardly saw it. He watched their newfangled bond and the floating soul. He had all reasons under the sun to justify his stance, but since his arrival at the seashore, nothing but guilt engulfed his conscience, and every turn of event uncannily mounted on his helplessness. He felt it senseless to spend one more moment in that God-forsaken place. He stood up and started to walk away, when he saw an aging, bending grotesque figure walking towards him. He knew that face. The similarity it bore with a face from his memories was enough to fuel his impulse to move towards the figure and pull it close to his heart. The weak female could barely push him back, rather she felt the warmth in his hands to be comforting against the cool breeze. She looked at him. He could see her inquisitive look deteriorating in the search for a familiar name of a face. Her quaint voice mumbled something gibberish, but held her hand firmly on his. Amma, how are you? She smiled at him. You recognized me? She stopped smiling. It's me. Isaac. She remained clueless, holding her hand firmly onto his shoulders. You are Raghu's mother, right? You know me, Amma. I used to visit your home, long ago. The Jew from the orphanage. Isaac. Her visage could only allude to him to either negate the disposition of his memory, or hers. But he kept smiling at that old woman and took her to the nearby cafe. Sipping hot tea with a bite of banana fritters, she kept on saying a lot of things in her gibberish language and Isaac listened to her patiently, nodding his head in unison. Their conversation was abruptly stopped by the loud horn of a container vessel across the sea. The humongous structure invoked almost everyone's attention to Neptune. The color of smoke was less black from what he had seen at the Cochin shipyard long ago. Long, long ago. The refreshing tea inside his body undusted the best memories of his life, and the worst. Why are you not coming? This is the biggest fun part of the whole school life. Our friends will go different routes after the exams. You know why I can't come. Don't you have anything left in your savings? Raghu nodded in disagreement. Have a chat with your father. I guess he will help. Or maybe with Alma. She should be having some money with her. The seaside town is a great place. I have seen it while traveling to the archdiocese with our mother. There were huge ships at the dock with stacked metal boxes. Isn't that amazing? Don't you want to see that? Raghu felt a drop of water involuntarily sliding down from his right eye. He wiped it abruptly. Isaac guiltily realized that he went a little overboard with his excitement to stand afoot on a ship. He wanted to be a mariner like the famous Magellan from the West, or Sinbad from the marine folklores. The gloomy teardrop from his friend's eyes cleared the camouflage and threw light on the fact that none of these excitements can bring a smile on his face without his best friend accompanying him on the journey. Seeing Raghu, trying hard to prevent an emotional downpour, he witnessed the state of helplessness again in his life. Hey. I'm sorry. No. Don't be. It's okay. Wait, let me see if I can do something. It's fine, Isaac. I'm not very interested in going for the excursion. Isaac could clearly see the blatancy in those words. He looked at his watch. Can you come here, to this exact place, by 10:30? That late? Nope. Not possible. Why? Okay, leave it. Can you stay awake till I come to your house? And try to come out when I knock on the windows? Raghu had no clue on what was going on. Be there, okay? I got to go. Rushing towards him, and gently thudding his forehead towards Raghu's, Isaac took off to his place in a jiffy. That was their new cue. The gesture of exposing their affection. It started with a hug, which got improvised in time to this. An unexpressed feel of affinity hovered around them in their daily meetups. And they wanted it to be prevalent in the same unexplored way. In the same unapologetic way. Alma, any chance? I promise I will make that money within 1 month. Can you please tell father? She had all the reason under the sky to release her anger on him. The leftover rice grains in their kitty could hardly make a day's morsel. The 4 walls which they called home were waiting for a strong wind to collapse its existence. Her memories had lost the remembrance in which her husband remained sober. Her final hopes of revival had succumbed to the persistent hardships. But she kept calm and caressed her son's head and said, Son, it is time for you to mature. For your studies and for your enjoyment, it is high time that you make and take your own decisions. I don't have the capability to help you. And don't expect any help from your father. Pouring the leftover watery rice gruel into his aluminum plate, she walked away. Whatever his Alma said was nothing unexpected, not enlightening, but it sure killed any remains of the hope for good riddance. For a moment, he forgot the desolation inside him and gratefully drank the handful of hot food in his hands. He lied on the grass mat near the window and fell asleep, completely forgetting the fact that his bestie was on his way to meet him. Hearing a series of low whispering and mild thuds, Raghu's Alma opened the window to see a panting Isaac with something held tight in his hands. What is it, son? How come you are here? Alma. Is Raghu awake? She understood the gist. Without making any fuss, she woke Raghu up and sent him to Isaac through the dilapidated back door. I had asked you to be awake. Sorry, Isaac. I needed some sleep. Things are not the same. What happened? Nothing. Nothing serious. But, I think it is time for me to be serious. What is it, Raghu? I have to take care of myself. My studies. My life. I am going to get back up. I am on my own. Isaac remained silent. What? I left you alone for just 2 hours, you have grown up so fast. Both laughed out mildly, without waking anyone. Tomorrow is going to be one memorable day in our life. It will be a good boost to your future life. Before being mugged up by your own busy struggles, let us enjoy this, together. Isaac showed his left hand, which was kept fisted the whole time. It unfolded to showcase a few dingy, folded notes. Raghu couldn't believe his eyes. He felt his vision going mushy with the water filling in his eyes. Isaac. How come? He smiled. Keeping his happiness in the lower alto, Raghu hugged his friend and cried silently for a few seconds. He had lost all the possible hope to be a part of the trip. And he never thought Isaac would find a way to get him aboard. I thought, at the worst, you won't go on the trip and join me here. Chuckles. How did you arrange the sum? Do you think I'm a fool to sit here and weep with you while all the other students are enjoying it? Isaac laughed. But. For a moment he was startled and moved by the gesture from Raghu. He kissed him. And that kiss was not a friendly kiss. At least for him. He received it abruptly, but there was an electrifying pass of emotion throughout his body. He didn't know where he kissed him, nor had a faintest idea if his counterpart shared the same ilk of feelings when their skin touched in tandem. But, he knew one thing for sure. Raghu was the one. He held his hand and pulled him closer to make out. Isaac looked deep into Raghu's eyes to find the answer. He looked deeper and urged Raghu to realize his incertitude through his eyes. In the faint moonlight, in the shimmering sparkles of the minuscule stars, he saw it. He got the answer. Both of them smiled and came closer to culminate the night's emotions, but were suddenly taken aback by the thudding sound of something. Raghu eyed him to leave and he ran inside. Isaac too left the place and ran back to his place. On his way back, he contemplated the happenings of the whole night. It was an emotional roller coaster ride. Isaac was still living in the awe of happiness. Without uttering a word, he had won his quest of love. A love, which was something unfathomable even for him till that night. A moment's turn of events convinced himself that all inkings that his body and mind besought in the past, whenever he had thoughts of his best friend, were honest and acceptable. He was levitating on the run. And the day arrived. The best day in the lives of the two taintless souls. The Queen of Arabian Sea welcomed them in all grandeur. The sun was shining bright, and the wind was moist. Even though it was the time of transition between the summer and monsoon, none of the rain clouds found their passage to spoil their big day. The scenic beauty of the fort city satiated their longings. Isaac bought salted gooseberries and mango slices from the leftover dole money and savoringly shared the bitovers with his friend. The pride in their eyes was nothing but the utterance of love. The stationary tankals, the rowing boats, rocky beaches, shoot the balloon games, kite flying and many more. The time seemed to fly unapologetically. With the two moving alienated with their hands tied like a knuckle joint invited sneers and friendly jolts from other classmates, but none of them paused a tiny snarl to their devourer of the moments. The school authorities had arranged food from a local eatery that served the typical Kerala matta rice with the spicy red fish curry. The combo was embellished by a spread made out of coconut grate and crushed, dry prawns. Even in the noon heat, the students savored the hot spice with ease and vigor. Post-lunch, they were taken to the artistic part of the port city, where a number of monuments from the pre-independence era held its magnanimity. The Jew synagogue brought twinkles in their eyes. Though the entrance was restricted only to a few portions of the monument, the aisles and the altar brought peace in Isaac's mind. Raghu could see that in his eyes. They stayed a while back even after the group left. Isaac went to the caretaking personnels and inquired for a rabbi nearby. Raghu and Isaac went to a nearby street and found a dilapidated wooden establishment. An old man wearing an unwashed gown sat in the front, murmuring verses in Hebrew. Isaac kissed his hands and said something in his ears. The rabbi looked at the dazed Raghu and called him closer. He held their hands and continued his murmurs. Raghu looked at Isaac, but failed to get a response amidst his closed eyes and prayer-committed mind. After a minute's chant, the rabbi pulled their hands, gesturing them to make a bend. He held his hands over their head and finally said something in English. God bless you. While leaving, Raghu asked him about his conversation with the priest. There is a priest in America, whose name is Alan Bennett. I read about him recently in a weekly that comes in the church library. I said to this priest about my similarities with that man. And he understood my feelings. Raghu did not fathom a word from Isaac, one more link to their chain of conversations which were mere lines drawn on water. Most of them had an unmentioned pact that there won't be any outcomes in the end. In a jiffy, amidst his lasting thoughts of the previous conversation, Raghu found himself pounded towards Isaac and a deep pressing of a desiccated pair of flexible muscles onto his. For a moment, he went blank. But when he opened the eyes of his senses, he saw a dangling eyelash on Isaac's right eyelid, trying to make a move. He slowly pushed Isaac back, took the eyelash carefully with his fingers. Make a wish. Isaac smiled, and blew the holy hair without thinking a moment. Both of them smiled in love and rejoiced the moment with another kiss. You were right. He caressed Isaac's hands like a newborn baby's and continued. Today was the best day in my whole life. Isaac smiled. They walked across the moonlit sand beds, gently swinging their hands against the night breeze. The wind had a moist breath, leaving sweat beads on their palms. What did you like the most during the trip? Make a guess. Isaac started pondering. Waves silently moved one after the other. Few men were trying their luck at fishing in the dark. An eerie silence surrounded them which was troubling Isaac, but he was too obsessed at their moment to care. Was it the synagogue? Nope. The priest? Nope. With each question, the grip became tighter. Isaac knew what Raghu liked the most, but he kept the list unending to devour the playful amour that was budding between them. When it became evident that Isaac was playing a prank, Raghu pulled Isaac closer to him and wanted to ask him if his uncaring brains did not know what was his favorite during the trip. He also wanted to culminate the part by kissing his partner. But a grotesque figure was following them in the beach stroll. Isaac had a notion of this presence for a long time, but he couldn't careen his focus. It was inevitable to wade into that presence at that very moment. Without a change in expression, the person sea-faced himself and spoke to the boys. Son, your mom is waiting at home. Take a fast step, and also tell her that I am not having dinner at home, today. There was a non-negotiable determination and command in those words, that passed an involuntary rush of blood into the legs of Raghu. He found himself running towards his home without bidding an adieu to his friend. Isaac stood there wondering what was going to happen to him, and what was going in the man's head. Raghu's father was counting the number of biddies in the pouch he took from his pocket. Once he was done, he motioned him to follow him, and he moved towards the sea. Trying hard to quell the impending shiver, Isaac moved diligently, following the steps of that daunting figurine. Isaac sat a foot behind where Raghu's father sat, probably as a safety measure. Raghu's father eyed him to move forward, but he didn't budge a bit from that comfort zone. How was your trip? It was good. When are the exams starting? Next week. You and Raghu are having the same dates for exams? No. He is having a different center? What is that? Isaac had no idea where this conversation was leading to. But he kept the clockwork going. Examination center, uncle. The place where we write the state exams. It won't be in our own school. Good. He lit a biddy and went on pondering. He always felt intimidated with him around, the pungent smell of alcohol, the incessant cuss words which were showered onto his friends and family, the ugly duels in the middle of the road or on the sands. But all of this felt normal to Isaac while he found out the sober state of this man. He was at the peak of petrifaction. Uncle. It is high time. Can I go? He kept mum. Uncle. Can I? What is the time now? Isaac hastily looked at his watch, which was loaned from the Mother Superior for the day. It is 9:15. Ragu's father looked at him and smiled eerily. For the first time, their eyes met and Isaac felt he had already leaked 2 drops of piss. You came to the doors of my home yesterday, a bit later than this time. So you can stay more for some time. Can't you? Isaac felt his blood had frozen. He fought hard to move his neck muscles to nod positive for the man's command. Ragu's father did not utter a word until he finished 3 biddies. It felt like he was on a rally in smoking those substandard tobacco rolls. But the focus and intensity in those eyes never budged and Isaac knew something serious was going on in his head. The silence finally broke. I have been drinking since I was 12. I started with the brew from cashew apples that was brought from Karnataka. I had a friend from Neilswaram in the plantation where I used to work. That was rather an energy drink to work at odd hours in the hills. Later I started having toddy made from palm trees. But that was not frequently available. Nowadays. Actually until yesterday, I drank whatever I got for the day, and most of the days would end up vomiting and beating up my wife and children. Isaac kept his eyes down and heard the man's confessional note. I couldn't drink yesterday night. One of my friends ditched me, said he would bring a foreign brand which he got from his brother-in-law. I waited for him for a long time here, on the beach. Frustrated, I returned home. It was late. When I reached near my home, I could hear a whispering sound. I could see 2 shadows standing very close to each other, and I was sure inside my stupid brain that it was my wife talking to her probable lover. If there were some spirit in my gut, I would have ran towards him yelling and killed that ****ard without a second thought. But I was truthful to my senses yesterday night. Thanks to my friend who bailed me out, chuckles. Isaac wanted a wave to pounce over him and take him into the sea. He was fighting hard to stay put in that humiliation. Anne. I saw you mouthing kisses at my son. Uncle, it is not what you think. I dash. How old are you? He cut Isaac in the middle. Answer me, Isaac. 15. He took one more biddy from the pouch. Isaac saw that there were none left. I worked for more than 20 years in the plantations. More than your age. And when I resorted to Eric's to fight the cold, some of my fellows went to those ladies who lived on giving fleshly pleasures. And then there were those filthy ****guards, who would swallow others' meat and snug their meat into their fellow's bum. Uncle, you are mistaken. I am not interested in such bodily pleasures with your son. I am dash. Son, hear me out. I am neither blaming you nor abusing. I am here to make a point. And I will. Isaac wanted to tell him how he found his piece of soul in Ragu. He wanted to describe that beautiful moment when he realized that Ragu was the one. He wanted to shout it out loud, I love Ragu. But he stood silent, heeding to what Ragu's father had to say. Those men, in the plantations. They had no respect among us. We never took them along for anything. We had pulled strikes for higher wages, we had staged protests for urinals for women, we had even poisoned a planter who dared to molest the wife of our senior fellow. None of these collective had their participation. We denied it, yes. And if you ask me why, I don't have a solid answer. Sometimes, I felt bad for them. But when one of them tried to touch my meat, he tasted his own blood. Everyone hated them. So did I. We asked them to stop this disgrace. At least within the plantation premises. But they always restarted. They were in the union, and hence we couldn't oust them from the work. Eventually they left, when the humiliations were too hard to handle. I still see some of these BU*** heirs in the neighborhood, ready to smother your meat for nickels. Some of them have good education, some of them have good wealth in their family. But if a man likes to bend his back in front of another man, you bow down in front of the whole society. Isaac stood uninterested in the man's brag. He waited for his chance to justify his deeds. Isaac. Now you are 15. It is a tender age and will have a lot of confusion in your mind. It is also the age where you cannot hear others' voices and even worse stop something that you desire the most. Isaac wondered what would come next out of the man's mouth. I can imagine what is going through yours and my son's minds. I also know what would happen if the world we live in here and see about you too. You know me. For the larger part of my life as a husband and father, I have failed in my life, miserably. I don't think I will be able to regain any bit of respect for the rest of my life. But I have decided to try my part. I have decided to quit drinking. A priest once said to me, if I could get my mind past the very next day of sobriety, then I can succeed for the rest of my life. And the very thought that helped me drive past this day was the scene that I saw yesterday. It depicts the worst example of me being a bad father. Not taking care of my son. Not making him aware of what is right and what is wrong. Teaching him what, how and whom to love in this world. I will do it from now. Isaac felt a tear of shame in his cheek. Deep inside his heart he knew he was right. But somewhere in the subsurface, there was a skin that covered his inner self from being brave and expressive. He stood in front of that reformed man like a culprit. He went on with his sermons and self-curses, but Isaac didn't hear a word. He could only hear the sound of the waves, as if they originated from his inner self. His heartbeat rhymed in tandem with the waves humming. His legs went brittle and his hands seemed numb. For a moment, when he tried to regain his conscience to reality, he heard a question being repeated by Ragu's father. Isaac, do you hear me? He looked at him. Will you stay away from Ragu till the exams are over? He nodded. He didn't care what he spoke before and he didn't want to know if he could reconcile with Ragu after the exams. He nodded and left the scene. Ragu's father left a parting comment which Isaac heard while continuing his walk. I confide in you to keep this meeting a secret. Isaac did not respond. He couldn't sleep that night, and for many nights that followed. He wrote the exams, and did not take a step to see how his friend was doing. Nor did he receive any inquiries from his counterpart. Once the exams were done, he requested the Mother Superior to transfer him to their church in the Mumbai diocese that would help him fulfill his naval dreams. When his results were palpable, and when things fell into place, he decided to move to the busiest city of the country, and before leaving the small town, he wanted to meet his friend for one final time. But when he visited Ragu's home, it was found to be taken over by the government. When inquired, he came to know that Ragu and his family had shifted to the Malabar side of Kerala. It was hard to digest the turn of events. But all of these happened at times when technology was not matured to be able to steer decisions in the relationships. It was only the postal addresses that connected people. But Isaac was a fierce, determined teenager. He was not ready to bow his manhood in front of a reformed drunkard and his cowardly son. He dwelt on his ambitions and moved to Mumbai, and later to the Middle East to serve the oil corporations. In his professional journey as a successful sailor, he tried repeatedly to relate his love to many, both men and women. But all failed miserably, circling his mind back to that night when he chose silence instead of fighting back for his love. His first love. The purest form of love that was devastated by his amateurism and the imminent fear of a desperate father. It had more conviction than all relationships that followed. And now, standing in the dusk of his life, alone, unloved, and uncared, seeing the bodily form of his love in ashes, he had nothing but one feeling in that heavy, dying heart of his. Remorse. Slowly sipping the latte at the airport cafe, he typed the customary comment, heartfelt condolences, in the obituary post that proclaimed that death of Mr. Raghuvran Pithamaran. Isaac smiled at the irony of that name. It had the names of the person he loved the most. He then exited himself from the Facebook group, which was his only source of his information about Raghu and other classmates from the school. He also deleted the contact of Raghu, which he had saved once found in the Facebook search, but was never used. He continued sipping the caffeine, trying hard to simmer the day's emotions. At once he saw a male couple, holding their hands tight, and had ostentatiously dressed to represent their sexual orientation. He could see weird looks from the people around. But the couple didn't care a bit. They seemed to enjoy all the freedom needed to happily live in this disparate world, vehemently tied in those hands. Isaac smiled.